Hey everybody, welcome back to the Devil's Brigade miniseries and also following the modern day soldier reenacting the 1942 Devil's Brigade. In this episode, you can be seeing them scale the mountain and also maybe getting in the middle of some tough situations, and that is being around the German occupied forces within the area. So let's take a look.
At dawn, on December 3rd, 1943, the Devil's Brigade launched one of the most daring assaults of the Second World War.
On defense, you climbed your fingernails, your teeth, and anything else you got to work.
And we climbed and we climbed and we climbed.
60 years later, this group of soldiers has just found out how tough a climb that was.
Jay was in front of me, and he grabbed the rock. It was as big as, I couldn't put my arms around it, and there was no, I tried to push it away, but it just overtook me and smashed me right into the other granite, face first, you know.
As the sun rose, the brigade was within a few hundred meters of the enemy.
We watched them come out of those rock caves and emplacements and go to their weapons and get set up. They were set up for the wrong direction.
Okay. What's that? Yeah.
The German forces were battle-hardened and desperate. And although the Devil's Brigade had surprise on their side, the struggle for Mount Defensa was far from over.
And then somebody said, okay, let them have it. And that was it.
Italy's Liri Valley, vast and fertile, has been the southern highway to Rome for 2,500 years. In his 1944 documentary, San Pietro, director John Huston described it this way.
Liri Valley lies in the Italian Midland, some 60 miles northwest of Naples to some 40 miles southeast of Rome. A wide, flat corridor enclosed between four walls of mountains. The valley floor with its olive groves and ancient vines, its crops of wheat and corn, is green the year around. That is, in normal times. Last year was a bad year for grapes and olives.
It just seems like history just keeps on repeating itself, doesn't it? Like, look at the Ukraine war as an example. You're seeing the same crap, like bad conditions, underpaid soldiers, bad nutrition, bad machinery. The Russians just like coming in as cannon fodder nonstop, while political individuals get to stay warm, like have fine wine and eat like any type of meat that they ever want. Like it just keeps repeating itself nonstop. It's just, we just let this keep on happening, like regardless. It's just, there's always a tyrant, it always seems, and then all the population are always the first ones to suffer.
By November of 1943, the Allied advance had bogged down in a sea of winter mud and fierce German resistance. San Pietro, Montelungo, Monte Cassino. Some of the most bitter battles of the Second World War were fought in the Liri Valley. Into the maelstrom came a group of men whose very name would chill the enemy. They were the 1st Special Service Force, the Devil's Brigade.
Our orders were that the regiment was assigned to take a mountain called Defensa.
After the Allied landings at Salerno, the U.S. Fifth Army advanced rapidly towards Rome. North of Naples, they ran into a German defensive position which stretched across the spine of Italy, known as the Gustav Line. It stopped the Allied advance at a town called Cassino in the Liri Valley. Overlooking the valley, and key to the German strategy, was a mountain known as La Defensa. From Defensa's peaks, the Germans could see the Allied armies in the valley below. And what they could see, they could kill. This is Defensa today. Its tranquility masks the horrors men faced here as they fought, often hand to hand, for a small plateau near the summit, known as the Saucer.
Like, check out all the jagged rocks within this. Like, if you're somebody who's like literally like fighting through this, and let's say you come from the right-hand side and you're trying to take on the mountain, there's so much cover throughout this entire experience. You're literally trying to navigate as if it's like a maze itself through all this rocks and debris. And if you're like fighting each other, like it just takes like a lucky shot to be able to hit the next person as they're slowly advancing. Especially if they're going to do like a pivot or like remove or maneuver around, or maybe a flanking position. Like you could probably flank around this way and kind of go up the mountain while your team is also like creating fire. But like, just it's almost like a volcanic eruption you can see that happen with just all this like random jagged rock. And if you were able to fall backwards on that, it'd just be absolutely painful beyond all measures.
60 years later, the Saucer is once again home to a unit of German troops.
Mein Name ist Ralf Ziegner, ich bin 24 Jahre alt. Ich habe als Gebirgsjäger 1998 bis 1999 in Berchtesgaden gedient, also bei der Infanterie. War eine sehr schöne Zeit. Momentan bin ich als Reservist tätig. Man kann sagen, dass ich nebenberuflich...
Mein Name ist Ralf Carstens, bin Obergefreiter, bin bei der Luftwaffe ausgebildet in Leck, Stadum von 78 bis 79 und bin noch im Reservistenverband RK Wiedinghall.
Mein Name ist André Schmotz, ich bin 27 Jahre alt. Ich habe bei der Bundeswehr eine Ausbildung zum Reserveoffizier gemacht, die hat 2 Jahre gedauert. Ich habe dort, war dort als Gruppen- und als Zugführer eingeteilt.
These men are all experienced soldiers who have come to Italy as part of a war game.
They serve part-time for 1 year. Experience is a little bit far-fetched because there's probably a requirement for them to be doing that, but at least they're playing the game. They're playing the German offensive within this, and maybe they have the experience. They'll definitely have the language to pull it off, but serving for 1 year, you're not going to see any combat whatsoever. You're not going to be doing that much. Like it's hard to believe they're a really actual experienced soldier.
They'll defend the Saucer from a squad of Canadian and American infantry who will try and overrun it. But they've also come out of respect for the Panzer Grenadiers who fought and died here. And like those men, the soldiers have no idea when the battle will begin. But they do know the enemy is coming.
Davon die rechte Bergspitze.
These are the men they will face. Canadian and American troops who have recently finished almost a month of training in the year 1942. But not just any training. Devil's Brigade training. The 1st Special Service Force was history's original hunter-killer unit. The training those men took was so brutal, so intense, so unlike anything the Army had taught before, the soldiers believed they could do the impossible.
Hey there, my webcrafting wizards. In today's episode, I want to show you a cool new way you can make some extra money as a designer or a developer. So as you know...
At Defensa, they would do just that.
This was our first combat action. And we, as far as I was concerned, we wanted to make it a success.
These soldiers will try to do what the Devil's Brigade did. Scale Defensa's cliffs and overrun the German positions. And although their weapons will only fire blanks, the mission they face is very real.
I mean, look at this place. You know, your avenues of approach are really constricted. You know, if you're moving up a road, you're probably going to get ambushed. So you got to get off into this jungle. It's intimidating. I mean, looking up at that peak right there and thinking, well, we're going to have to go up there, you know, and attack this group. You know, thinking that you'd have to do that under fire is a daunting challenge.
But climbing Defensa will be more than a daunting challenge. For some, it will be the most difficult mission of their lives.
I have a very, very bad fear of heights. You know, some people are afraid of spiders, some are afraid of snakes, I'm afraid of heights. Oh yeah, I'll be fighting my fear of heights the whole way when we do the climbing part.
If the men are to do it the Devil's Brigade way, they'll climb the mountain at night. November 1943. The 1st Special Service Force arrives in the shadow of Mount Defensa.
And it was pouring rain. It was pretty rugged because it was nothing but mud. It had been raining. That was the worst winter, apparently, in Italy in I don't know how many years.
Across the Liri Valley, men were wet and cold, anxious to keep their weapons dry.
We were always worried the machine guns would jam. They would freeze up in the cold. It was constantly snowing, wet snow. And it stuck to the metal and froze.
Metall des MGs haften geblieben und ist gefroren.
If you tried to pull the trigger, nothing happened.
I love this that they're able to find some veterans from the German side of things. Like being in 2025 right now, it's been a long time since we've been at war with Germany, of course, and since then they've been an ally, believe it or not. But be able to hear the stories of what they've been going through, the people who are like basically didn't have a choice to fight, as most soldiers are, kind of. It's just the way it is. It's just like if your country tells you to fight, like looking at Ukraine as the example once again. They conscripted anybody from 18 years old and older, and you weren't allowed to leave the country. And that was exactly the same way. If you left the country and you're caught at the border, they would kill you basically on sight or throw you back into the meat grinder, if you will. So you can be all upset about that if you want, but that's just the reality of the way that we still live in today. We're still kind of almost like a barbaric kind of mentality with a really bad political like figures ahead of us. So I don't know. It's interesting. I'm excited to see what this guy has to say. I'm very interested in the history behind the German side, as well as obviously all the other ally side as well. And let's take a look.
Hat sich nichts bewegt.
I remember the rain, I remember the food, and I remember the guns. And I figured to myself, this is going to be one hell of a war.
These men have come to the Liri Valley in the dry season. Their olive grove is an oasis, not a swamp.
Yeah, I'll take that stuff.
But like the men of the brigade who paused here 60 years ago, they have no tents, no fires, and no hot food. Dinner is what soldiers call sea rations, box lunches from 1943.
We have 1 can of chicken luncheon meat. We have graham crackers and defense biscuits. Vanilla caramels. Bouillon powder. Sugar. Compressed sugar. Little wooden spoons, matches, cigarettes, gum, and a little can opener.
Let me know in the comments down below if you want me to do a segment about the different types of rations each country was dealing with in today's time. I've seen a couple like little episodes here and there about Canadian rations versus American rations versus like Italian rations, and it's very interesting to see each kind of meal plan that there is. I know that for Canada, for example, a lot of it's not too bad. I kind of comment about this a little bit in my last video, but in a different segment, but. Overall, it's not too bad. You have to kind of like boil the rations here and there, but you get like Hungarian goulash, you get chili, a bunch of other things. Obviously, it's not like going to be this awful from 1942 type style rations, but it was always a lot of fun to share rations with the Americans and get different varieties as well. And how it's kind of funny that with both sides of the border basically put hot sauce on everything and always have some sort of treat or biscuit or gum or whatever at the end of the meal itself. So both always create a ton of garbage, as you can see in this video right now, but it didn't really matter because you had to eat and it had to be basically ready to go when you needed it.
Zing zing, that's right. Zing zing, yeah.
On the mountaintop, the German squad prepares their meal. The Wehrmacht rations of canned meat, bread, and soup are what German troops ate when and if the supply trains got through.
Schwierig war es für die Versorgung.
The difficulty lay in the constant resupplying of the frontline soldiers with ammunition and especially with food.
Die Essenträger mussten oft
The food carriers often had to climb up the mountain with jerry cans of soup or meat dishes, and often they came late. The soup or the meat was spoiled.
Die Suppe, das Fleisch kam gesäuert an.
In 1943, the Allies...
I'm going to stop it there for a second. Like, if you're coming in jerry cans of soup or meat, and you have like a hot climate like Italy, it's really bad intel from the officer side of things and the kitchen staff kind of things that you think that's actually going to keep. Like you think that you would have to have obviously jerry cans of water and anything that's been hydrated or like dehydrated or freezed or whatever, like in order to get up. Obviously you can't freeze things back then, but like dehydrated meats as an example, bread, stale bread, that kind of stuff that maybe could be rehydrated. Like canned fruit as an example. Like it just seems like really dumb like upper like management, and it still happens today. We still got a lot of dumb idiots up the front.
Allies patrolled this valley constantly, capturing POWs, meeting partisans, anything to determine where the German guns were. But this squad has no one to help them. So Chris Bird and Jay Budd have gone to do what any good soldier facing a tough mission would do. Find out what they're up against.
So we're looking for a nice natural path that's through this thick brush right here. And a lot of times, if you just take your time, and you can find a natural trail that the animals use. So that's going to be the path of least resistance.
Since the war, the mountain has become overgrown with thorn bushes and dense brush. Climbing Defense's cliffs will be dangerous. Finding a route to reach them might be impossible. On the day of the assault, the squad prepares with quiet confidence. These men are soldiers from some of the finest regiments, and they've worked hard to prove themselves worthy of this mission.
Looking forward to it. Just want to get up there. Yeah. It's a long go. You don't want to dishonor those guys.
The advantage on any battlefield is held by those who control the high ground. These troops are expecting an assault, but they don't know how many men are coming or from which direction. So they're following the routines the Panzer Grenadiers did in 1943. Maintain the perimeter, use the cover, and wait.
Die deutschen Soldaten.
For the most part, the German soldiers of the Italian front came from the campaigns in France and Russia.
Von Frankreich und Russland.
So they were experienced soldiers, used to quietly following their orders, to doing what they were told without complaining.
Wortlos ein.
The Germans had everything zeroed in, and they're looking down from the top of that mountain, and they could see an ant move, if you want to put it that way.
Hundreds of artillery pieces were coordinated from Defense's heights. The men who controlled them were dug in and almost invincible to frontal attack. But the Devil's Brigade was not the type of unit to walk into the enemy's line of fire. Colonel Frederick, the brigade commander, wanted to see the mountain for himself. So he commandeered an aircraft and flew repeatedly over the German positions. If others couldn't find a way to silence those guns, he would.
The colonel made the decision when we go up, we won't take the usual route, we'll never make it. We'll have to do something different.
When Frederick returned, he had a plan, and this is what he decided. He would take the brigade north through the Allied front lines into no man's land, where they would hide directly below the German guns until nightfall. His scouts would then move on to the mountain, placing ropes on the undefended cliffs behind the German positions. The rest of the brigade would then climb those cliffs in the darkness and at dawn attack the Germans.
Cheers, boys. To the force.
To the force. – 4 p.m. The long climb begins.
You gotta admire like the amount of bravery it does to take up that kind of positioning and like going through all that kind of crap in the middle of the night. It takes a very like select few people who are able to kind of like deal with that kind of stuff, to be able to have that strength and endurance to like even just like that cool head to like be able to follow through those orders. And it's something that really, I don't know, in my experience in the forces, you don't really get to see too often. I feel like it's been kind of been dumbed down a lot. There's too much politics involved with a little bit of everything. Even just like when you just saw the previous clip there, that he literally just commandeered a plane and just started flying over the freaking place. And like today, like how could you do that? You got so many like roadblocks in the way. Also, the technology on top of that. Like if you were trying to fly that over any enemy positioning today, they'll just cut you down with machine gun fire, anti-aircraft fire, like javelin missiles, that kind of stuff. Like it's just like the only way you could do is like unmanned aircraft and like AUVs, if that, and maybe even have a little bit like satellite imagery if you're lucky to have that in that certain position or that certain time. But basically, like any mission, like I've done a bunch of combat missions as well in Afghanistan, and a lot of it's like just you're doing missions in the night, and you're extremely like it's like freezing out, but like all the gear that you have on, it causes a lot of sweating. There's a lot of weight on your back. You try to go slow, so you're not like gonna like kill yourself by going over like an IED, that kind of things. But like once you get up to the top of the mountain, like and early in the morning, you're cold. So like being able to go through that entire endurance of scaling a mountain, you're definitely covered in sweat. You probably have literally no water left, and then you're expected to fight an enemy at the end of that. So I think that's really important when they have those exercises when you got to do like a 13K rucksack as an example, which I don't know if they're really doing that anymore in the Canadian Armed Forces, and then also do a fireman's carry at the end of it to kind of just show that you're able to have that a little bit extra endurance. So yeah, I don't know, it's kind of interesting to me.
The squad's plan is to follow the route the Devil's Brigade took and reach the foot of the cliffs before dark. But it's a long way to those cliffs, and the men have no maps. They're prepared for a long night. They have no idea.
You don't want to talk to anybody. You just want to get the hell in there and get it over with. As soon as possible. You're almost mute.
I went out on patrol. Mike Meiklejohn went out on patrol. Ed Thomas was out on patrol.
Several of us, including Tom and Bill Rothland, went up a ways where there was a little rise that we had to climb, and we set ropes there to make it easier.
Yeah, the guys went up first and put in the ropes and what have you, but they had to wait until, well, I was told that it was about 900 artillery pieces put in a 4-hour barrage on the mountain. Basically, they kept the Germans occupied trying to stay out of the artillery barrage, and I wouldn't think they'd hear anything. And that was the idea, that it would divert them thinking something was coming from somewhere else.
So many shells were fired that night, the men called Defensa the $1 Million Mountain. Money, they said, which was very well spent.
Tom ordered the battalion to get started, and we started up in pretty much single file up the mountain. And we climbed and we climbed and we climbed.
Well, it was a pretty steep climb.
Rain showers every now and then, and we could hear the artillery preparation, pounding the mountain, preparing it for our final assault.
"8 p.m. The squad is at rest.
Wow. Right now we're at another security halt. We got a good view of the mountain. The leadership, Jay and Albert, are going to get their bearings. And then we're going to pick the best avenue approach up the mountain.
We have to go ahead and rock and load now because these grands, you hear that noise, right? We can't go up the mountain and do that. Everyone was trying to be safe, but if anybody, that sound just travels through the forest, so especially
The climb has gone well.
That's really smart strategically planning, basically, is that if you want to make sure that you're locked and loaded before you go up, in my opinion, you would probably even do that maybe even at the bottom of the mountain. You know, obviously maybe not cock your rifle, maybe you wouldn't put on a safe, but you always kind of run the risk of discharging it by accident. But if you're around an enemy force and you don't know what's going to happen, the last thing you want to do is running a weapon that's cold, and that way you're not going to get the objective. You're not going to be able to get the upper hand on the enemy. So being sure that your team is actually ready to go, that they check their grenades, that they're protected. Any extra ammo, any rations, anything like that, anything that's shiny, make sure it's put away. Make sure that you have any camouflage that you need is obviously super important.
But as twilight falls, Danny Hassel is worried that Jay Budd does not know the right path to take.
Did you see that trail at all? It's back there before the road forked. It looked like it was going up straight to the cliffs, right? We might as well stay in this triple canopy, but it's exactly where they went up.
Okay.
I'm all over it. You guys have,
All right, roger that.
If you want to take the tourist route, we can go that way, but...
No, let's roll.
All right. I'm going to talk to the machine gunners.
On Defensa's summit, the German troops finish their last patrol of the day. For almost a week, they've been on edge, waiting for the attack.
Klappspaten sind frei. Wenn der Feind zu nah dran ist, befehle ich Klappspaten frei, daher den Klappspaten schon mal in die Stellung.
Like any good officer, Andre Schmotz issues orders for the night. If something happens and you run out of ammo, he says, keep your head down.
Nein. Ihr zieht alle die Köpfe ein, wenn ihr eure Munition aufgebraucht habt.
For these men, their time on Defensa has passed in a routine most soldiers know well. Moments of alarm, hours of work, days of boredom. But tomorrow will be different. Midnight. Danny's instincts were right. The squad is lost.
The traveling's been pretty tough since the sun went down. The terrain itself isn't what makes it difficult. It's the fact that we can't see where we're going. A lot of the guys have carried quite a bit of kit. One guy has a machine gun. It's really big, really heavy. Apparently we are 100 meters inferred away from the Germans.
They think they're near the cliffs, but no one knows for sure.
It's a little challenging at night.
I always find this really difficult to find that like a lot of soldiers were able to do this back in the day with zero light. I think that whenever you're going to do some sort of attack or scale mountain like this, you have to have some kind of light. So like whether that be like a full moon, perhaps, or maybe like better lighting conditions, because they didn't have NVGs. They didn't have like they had to conduct light discipline. So you couldn't even run around with like a flashlight or torch. They even had like a red light filter on top of it. And if you did try to do that, like you're probably going to be spotted and you're going to be like cut down by machine gun fire or maybe even any kind of like, sniper fire as an example, right? So they go in the crazy darkness, and maybe that's just done for the filming of this episode, but strategically, I think from Intel side of things, I wouldn't send anybody up a mountain unless they were able to see at least 2 feet in front of them. And with any camo they would be able to kind of like protect them from the enemy from trying to find them like basically below the mountain.
During the day, this is just a quick boulder, piece of cake.
The men have approached this climb like a real Special Forces mission. No light, no noise, no quitting. 60 years ago, the Devil's Brigade had no choice but to do the same.
Doing it in the middle of the night with dead silence, and you can't see much.
As quiet as possible. You cannot move that many men with that much equipment without making some noise.
You weigh so much you can hardly move.
Rifle, 45, your ammunition for both. I was carrying some ammunition for a machine gun. I also had a jerry can of water, which just about kills you getting up there.
You weigh about 300 pounds. This is not very easy, and it was cold and wet, and the mountain was very steep, so you are climbing with anything you could.
And we climbed and we climbed and we climbed.
As those men pushed forward, struggling under the weight of their combat packs, there was a moment of near catastrophe. A helmet fell.
Nobody knew that for quite a few years. No, the guy in front of me slipped on the rocks and whacked me in the head with his boot. And when you're climbing like that, you don't have a tight helmet around you, so it was loose, and he kicked it off. And it went down the hill.
Meet Jobber Copilot, your AI business coach, data analyst, and marketing expert in your back pocket.
But it was raining that night, and the moment passed.
I was mad because at that time I smoked and all my cigarettes and everything were in the helmet.
3 a.m. The squad has reached the cliffs, and they too are about to have a moment of near catastrophe. In the darkness, a rock slide.
Rock.
Did you know that more than 80% of my viewership are not subscribed? So if you could do me a favor, I commit to you that I'll be doing the best content. I can make myself available to you and get better and better. If you like and subscribe, we'll be getting more content out to viewers and be able to grow this channel into what we could probably get it into the next year. So with your help, it would be really appreciative. Thank you so much for watching. There's a lot of history buffs here. I'm also one of them, and I just love this community. It's been just amazing content, amazing people, amazing feedback, and because of you, I'm able to do this. So thank you again, and I can't wait to do the next one with you guys.